We are back with yet another track that we are going to collectively review the pros within the Sync Pro feedback community here. So who you see above me and below me are the other pros that are all involved with our pro feedback service, where we are on a monthly basis giving feedback to our members. And these are producers and library owners that I have specifically handpicked because they have great experience in this business, they make great music, but most importantly, they are able to give really helpful feedback and really educate you guys on how to make sure your tracks are much more acceptable by libraries and therefore placeable by TV clients, movie clients, commercial clients, all that good stuff, okay? So if you are not aware, up until now, it's only been available for our current members, our Sync Academy and Sync Edge members, but that's going to change on March 1st. March 1st is the big date where I'm actually going to release this publicly, so anybody actually can join, whether or not you are on our platform or not. And I'm going to be releasing a nice little discount, a guaranteed locked-in discount for the first 100 members that decide to join us. So if this review that you see here and this kind of feedback is what you think could really help you in your career and get rid of that maybe confusion or uncertainty of whether or not your tracks are actually licensable, I highly encourage you to consider joining us on March 1st and definitely be one of those first 100 if you want to save some money, all right? So let's go ahead and get started, and what we're going to do is listen to this track all the way through. Once it's done, I'm going to ask each one of our pros, including myself, to give maybe 1 or 2 notes on it and hopefully help this member create a much more licensable track in the end. This is Jed's track. He's one of our pro feedback members, and this is a sort of a minimal a minimal tension track that we're going to take a listen to, and let's see how he did. Let's take a listen. Here we go. All right, there you go. So I do apologize if that blew out a little bit at the end there. I don't know, my volume settings might have been a little loud, guys. But we definitely, I think, have some helpful notes for Jed here. So Hans, I'm going to go to you first, man, because you obviously are kind of our orchestral specialist here. So what did you think? What are some helpful notes that you can give for Jed here?
Well, one thing I heard is kind of like most people right now work when they master, they work with isotope and the tonal balance control thing, right? And it's a visual representation of the distribution of frequencies. And what I feel more and more that people just look, and by looking, forgetting that there are ears, that you kind of, this is an ear thing, it's an art of the ear, art of listening. And I feel, even though the distribution of the frequencies in this song is right, everything seems like, everything is there, but still it sounds too muddy for me. And the frequency they're just not working in parts. Mostly in the mid frequencies, it sounds muddy. In terms of the form, I like the form. It's certainly not minimal tension, but it's tension. I like the transitions. I think the transitions are done really well. In especially for the intro, what I would do, I would bring in more dynamic. That intro pad, when it comes in, is too loud, and I would start by adding stuff. You have, I think, 8 bars or even 16 bars at the in the first part. Give yourself some time to draw me in. Right, it starts just too big right away. That was something. Let me see what else came up. In the end, I think it's too, in terms of the groove, to make it more exciting, it's just too quarter note related. So I would see if you can do at the end something that has a little more syncopation to it, that makes it a little more exciting and brings out some of that excitement on a different level.
Absolutely. Philip, I know you've done actually quite a bit of orchestral work yourself. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought overall, I thought the track was pretty quiet. The whole level could be brought up volume wise, and I felt like the intro was too long. I felt like it was just kind of doing the same thing. Could at least cut that in half or add an element halfway through just to elevate it a little bit. I felt like when the drums started kicking in, that the impacts could be more impactful. I mean, they just kind of sounded thin and just just where they should be sounding just huge and this big epic ending. Um, and also, I felt at the very end, the last hit and the fade was very abrupt and could just let that ring out a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Trevor, do you have some thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Hans stole a bunch of mine, so I'm only gonna have a couple now. I think he was looking at my screen. So okay, so that yeah, the pad at the beginning, he mentioned that mastering, which I think everybody has kind of commented on. Overall, the track just feels a little underwhelming on the mastering side. Everything needs to just feel or sound better. And the only way I can explain it, or the only way I can kind of say it, is everything just kind of sounds a little underwhelming and dull. And all of the instruments and everything going on the track could be a bit more much, if that makes sense. Just some better mastering, maybe some uh, some trick I like to use is some tape. What's it called? Like tape
Saturation.
emulation. Yeah,
Hmm.
some a little bit of saturation, a little bit like kind of a little bit of bells and whistles, but not too much to kind of just spice up everything and bring it. Because even if I turned, because when we were listening, I was like, maybe it's just quiet. So I turned my volume up, but it just still sounded dull, even though it was louder. That was kind of my main thought that hasn't been said already. And then the other thing is, uh, existence wise, you said you wanted it to be a minimal tension thing, but then it felt like a trailer that didn't quite get to be a trailer track. And so I didn't really know what you were going for, and you kind of need to define what the track is. Because the beginning is kind of like I was like, oh, this is like, a crime investigation thing. And then by the end of the song, I'm like, this is an underwhelming trailer track. So I like, you kind of got to pick one or the other and then really go at what you want to do. And that was my main thought on the track.
Great points. Absolutely. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I agree with everybody. For the most part, like especially Trevor, what you were saying about this kind of sitting in between. It being like almost a trailer track, but not there. I actually think that the biggest thing with this is structure, and I think this is closer to a trailer track than anything else. But I do think that what you did was you kind of painted yourself into a corner. You started with your hook right from the top and you kind of built that as far as you could, and then you didn't know what to do. So it felt like, okay, well, now I just got to change a hook, right, for the last part. And so I think structure wise is the big thing here. I think what you can do is start off even more minimal, like even simpler, like one note, just really lay down the atmospheric, lay down the tone and the feeling and the vibe of this first. You already have this set up to be 3 acts, so your second act can then really introduce your hook, and really build that just a little bit, not as much as you're building it now, but just a little bit. And then, you can ride that hook throughout the entire track into your act 3. And your act 3, I think, should be massive. Like, think big, massive stacks of brass, layered synths, like, bass, big drums. And the thing about it is, I think the drums are too busy. So, if you think about like huge stacks of drums, bass, brass, everything, synths, like all hitting at once, having a space, let it breathe, and then having it hit again, this will sound like super massive. And I think that this will push it to where this wants to be a trailer track, I think, and it's just not there. As far as mixing and mastering goes, yeah, like I'm hearing, it's not really hitting my subs, at the same time, I flip over to my NS10s, it's not like, the mids aren't really, popping out. So everything sounds like a little bit flat and a little bit thin. So yeah, I would just say I think that's more than just mixing. I think, it needs more layers, a little bit more production, more saturation, more compression, stuff like that to like really get some more level out of this. But yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
Excellent. Great thoughts for sure, man. And Scott, how about you, man?
Oh, you guys took all my answers, so I got to think of something on the fly. No, I mean, it was an interesting track, and I liked the choices of the chord progression. I thought it was a kind of a neat, fun progression, and it was memorable in that respect. But like everyone else and what they were saying, it did feel like I kept having to remind myself, well, this is supposed to be a minimalist kind of style, So I'm writing down like the drums could be louder, and I was like, well, but if it's they're going minimal, then maybe they're not. I was thinking like, cymbals, where are the cymbals? I want to hear bigger crashes between the breaks. Yeah, like what everyone's saying, it kind of felt like it was structured as an epic trailer track, disguised as a minimal track. And so it was kind of going between those two worlds. And I think that it created a bit of confusion, and it made things a little bit harder to classify it.
Absolutely. Yeah, the only thing I can really add to what everybody's already said is I just felt there was a big lack of dynamics within this song in terms of the strings, the horns, the long strings, the short strings, everything that got layered in here. I could just see a sort of kind of heavy hand just playing the MIDI strings on your keyboard, and then that was it. So, and this is one of the most common notes that I give everybody who ever throws strings on their track, whether or not it's an orchestral track or they're just throwing strings on top of like a rock track or a hip hop beat, is we cannot, just go, okay, 1 note, 2 note, 3 note, great, done, next track. You do need to go back, or maybe during your recording process, use your modulation wheel and squeeze some dynamics out of your strings. So each individual note that you play in there can grow from like a piano soft to a medium or a forte. It depends on what the track wants and what it needs. But simply pressing those buttons and having the same dynamic throughout, like those horns at the end, I love that they were bringing all that like nice fiery energy into the track, but they all were just bab, bab. It was just very flat. It didn't pull me in. It wasn't like oozing a lot of those dynamics. So what we're doing, and the reason why that's so important, is we really need to mimic how an actual horn player would play that part, or how a string orchestral, whatever it is, if it's a quartet or if it's like a whole symphony, whatever it is, they don't play things flat. That's the one thing that you can guarantee if you go to any sort of performance, is there are a lot of dynamics, right? Things are quiet, they grow loud, they go louder, and then they get quieter again. So just make sure that when you do go into this orchestral lane in any capacity, it's step one is putting those strings onto your track, but step two, and it's the most important one, is adding the dynamics to the performance. So however you would like to do that. I've done both actually in my career. I've done some where the performance, the modulation wheel actually really works well with a particular string library that I have. Other times the modulation sucks. I don't like how it alters my strings, so I actually just go in and literally automate the volume within my track if I want to do that. So just make sure that everybody is doing that when they add those on there. But across the board, I think it's Jesse? Definitely. Oh, go ahead.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
To also add to what Hans was saying earlier, I do a lot of manual automation with my string dynamics, and it's easy to get into that visual trap of saying, oh, well, man, I got the curve down, -3 dB, and it looks like it's it's really swelling right there, but you really have to turn your ears on and, go back and like, is this really emoting, or am I just watching the fader kind of bounce up and down? And I think that's it. Really rely on your ears, and it will get easier and you will get more used to that the more you do it correctly.
That is a great point, because our eyes and ears can certainly play tricks on us, and that's happened to me many times. I'm glad you brought that up. In fact, closing your eyes is probably the best thing you can do in that situation when you've been lost in the weeds of drawing those little arcs and stuff, is go back, hit play, and close your eyes and don't look at it, because you're right. You do need to make sure that your ears are hearing what you intended it for that performance to do, and not just tricking yourself into like, I can see it, therefore it's there. So it's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up, man. Well, that's what we got for you, Jed. I really hope that these notes help you find some better, some clearer direction. The last note, or the last bit of advice I'll give you, is exactly what everybody said here, is the lack of focus here. Is this really a minimal tension track? Is this really trying to be a trailer track? Where is this trying to go? I think if you can go and find a reference track in one of those two directions, whether it's going to be a trailer track or it's going to be a minimal tension track, you really need to go use a reference track, because what you'll find is that you probably won't hear this kind of a structure with the track. You won't hear it starting from where it is, where you landed it. So you either need to follow a reference track that's really in that trailer world, so you can really mimic how they put their track together and how they start it and how they build it and how they end it, or you really need to go back to that sort of really minimal stripped down tension place, which is going to be a much smaller than this. It doesn't mean that it's worse music or anything like that. It just means it's not going to be as epic and as intense, but it's still going to be delivering a whole bunch of tension to it. So this is why I always harp on you guys, get those reference tracks, because it's literally a cheat guide. It's a cheat code literally for how to do this stuff, and you don't have to guess. You really don't have to wonder, what do I do? Well, what is the reference track doing? And literally follow in its footsteps without, of course, committing copyright infringement and stealing from it, but just using it as your sort of inspiration. So definitely, guys, make sure you do that. So that's what we got for you, Jed. I hope you find this useful. And for all of you guys that want feedback like this, March 1st is the date you need to set on your calendar, and look forward to that. I will be releasing this service to everybody. And again, the first 100 are going to get a pretty significant discount actually on your membership if you'd like to join us. So keep an eye out for your email inbox, and keep an eye out for this YouTube channel. I'll be releasing all of that stuff on March 1st.